What is going on, folks? This is Carolina Dad, your host of the Growls One Roar podcast. If you're a Panthers fan or if you're a Saints fan, I would appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button. Or maybe you're a fan of another team and you have somehow stumbled upon a preview of the Panthers and Saints and you are intrigued to know about the Carolina Panthers. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you also can hit that subscribe button. Folks, it's here. I'm excited. I'm elated. I don't know. I wish I could pop up the meme of Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay. Y'all got to go out and watch that clip. I posted it earlier. It was fantastic. Todd Bowles showing his enthusiasm, and Rick Stroud, who covers Tampa, said it would become a meme, so I was sure to make it a meme from my standpoint. But we're not here to talk about Tampa Bay, although I'll spend another 2 seconds talking about Tampa Bay. I got to tell you, the beat reporters and writers that cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are some awesome folks. Like, I know I'm in favor of the folks in Carolina, and I appreciate them. I mean, I follow the Panthers. That's the team that I closely monitor, and there's a ton of great folks there. But the Tampa Bay folks, man, they are always interacting with the stuff that I post. Primarily Greg, who writes for The Athletic, covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm on there all the time, like tweeting, retweeting, and he just comments whatever I post and responds to it, which is cool, man. Just being respectful to people, you see what happens. But here we go. We've got a game to preview. I was on ESPN Wilmington today with my man Randy Slack. I wish there was a way that I could figure out to get those recorded. I have to manually do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't go to a podcast or a platform for him to view. So I have to do it myself. And I did not do it because I usually talk to Randy when I go out for my daily run. So I did not get to do that. But we talked about the season and really taking a look at the offensive line as far as that being a key to success for the Carolina Panthers. And as we go in and preview Game 1 against the New Orleans Saints, there is no doubt in my mind that the offensive line is going to be a pivotal piece for this team, not just in Game 1, but for the entire season. We know they paid the 2-15 tax, which is the tax that you have to pay, not a literal tax, folks. Don't get too literal here, but the tax you have to pay for being one of the worst teams in the league, and that's what the Carolina Panthers were. So they signed Robert Hunt, pay him a ton of money, signed Damian Lewis, pay him a good chunk of money, move Austin Corbett over to center, and he shore up that interior. So I think coming in, the success of the offensive line is going to be a big storyline, a big key to success for this team. That's not even talking about Ike Ekwonu on the outside. Ike Ekwonu, man, big year incoming. We know about last year. You can put it behind you. I want to put it behind us as a fan base and what we saw. It's your time to prove it, man. And I'm hoping that the scheme and the fit plays out a little bit better for you. We take a look at the offense, and I'm just diving right in. I didn't know where I wanted to take this preview today. This is more of an old school podcast for me where I don't have a true set agenda, kind of just am going to go because I needed to get this episode out. I needed to get it out to preview the Saints. So that's why we're here. So we're going to bounce around a little bit. So just hang with me. So we're talking about the Panthers offense now. We talked about the offensive line. There should be some good depth pieces behind the guys that we carry. Now remember, we're not going to carry the full offensive line. Starters and backups probably carry 7 or 8 on the game day roster, but I feel good about the entire group that we're going to be bringing there. When you go out and look at the skill position groups, and you got to start with wide receiver, and I already did a comparison. If you've not seen it, I compared the entire roster last year to the entire roster this year. Right out of the gate, when you compare Deontay Johnson to DJ Chark, I personally am like, how in the world, when I was doing this last year, did I think DJ Chark was going to be like the guy, a true number one wide receiver? I think it was part of my fandom just being new to this world, and I'm like, what is going on? Now, maybe DJ Chark goes out to the Chargers and he balls out and he looks great. But at least today where we sit, when I compare Deontay Johnson to DJ Chark, I'm like, dude, complete upgrade for the Carolina Panthers. So I'm excited to see Deontay Johnson. You move off of him, though, and the skill position players, at least today, it's pretty similar to what we were trotting out there last year, which is kind of hard to believe because you think about this revamped offense, which under Dave Canales and the help of Brad Idzik is going to be a new offense, and we've seen bits and pieces of it. But I think for me, I always like, oh, man, this is going to be great. But then you're like, oh, wait, it's still Adam Thielen, which no knock on Adam Thielen. He's your slot. He's another year older. Still expect a good year out of him. And then Jonathan Mingo. So, like, the core group of receivers, it's those three, and that's who you're looking at on the depth chart heading into this week. What was interesting when they released the depth chart for the Carolina Panthers, which I talked about, is that they focused on 12 personnel, or that was the base that they set up when they published this, which is one back, two tight ends, and then you got two wide receivers. So I was like, oh, a little bit different there. Now the two tight ends in this group, I should say, it's Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, right? Now I'm like second guessing, but I'm like 95.99% sure it is Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson in the 12 personnel. So I second guessed myself there for a second. So I had to take a step back. But then you look at the tight end room, and it's Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas, if healthy. Now, maybe now is a good time to talk about the depth chart, my gosh. Talk about the injury report, and I'm going to try to pull it. I had it, and then I closed it, so I apologize because now I'm going to open this up again. And we do have injury reports. Now, remember, injury reports come out on Wednesday. They'll report Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we really won't know until we get into the game. A few notable injuries, 2 limited participants, and that is Josh Nijman, which is expected. He just came off the PUP. He's working his way back. That's your offensive tackle, the swing. Miles Sanders. Again, we know Miles Sanders. We didn't know this. Miles Sanders injured his finger in practice. So Canales did mention that today, talked about it, said that he should be able, hopefully, to play with this. We will see. That's one that we're going to monitor. And then both of your projected starting tight ends, and Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble. Ian Thomas battling a calf, Tommy Tremble battling a hamstring and back. I will tell you, it was earlier this week that Dave Canales said that Ian Thomas would not be available until week 2. And I don't know if he meant to say that, if it slipped, or why it came out, but it did. And maybe he wishes he didn't say it because you want to keep people guessing until you get to the finish line, really, and get up to the game. But you got those. And so we talk about 12 personnel. Ian Thomas, Tommy Tremble are your 2 projected starters. This opens up an opportunity, which we know, for Jatavian Sanders and Jordan Matthews. Now, the Panthers also signed former tight end of the Green Bay Packers, and I want to make sure I get his name right, Messiah Swinson. Say that right? Swinson. So they signed him, former tight end. I don't have expectations that he will play. Again, they signed him to the 53-man roster. Kind of hard to imagine that he is like game ready by the time we get to the game week. Now, on the New Orleans Saints side, there were 4 participants that did not practice, 3 that were limited, and then 1 that was a full participant but was listed on here. So you have Pete Warner, linebacker, battling a shoulder. He was a full participant. Then Willie Gay Jr., a linebacker, was limited. Marshawn Lattimore, cornerback, was limited with hip. Nick Saldivari, guard, has a calf, and he was a limited participant. And then the next 4 did not participate. Jalen Ford, Dallin Hoker, tight end, DeMarco Jackson, and Kalen Saunders. So all did not participate. So New Orleans has quite a few more folks on the list than the Carolina Panthers. Now we go back and, you kind of look at this again. So for me, I think it's a big day for Jatavian Sanders. And kind of wrapping all this together as best as I can, one of the questions that Randy asked was, who would I predict would be like rookie of the year out of this class? And I said, I'd love for it to be Jonathan Brooks. I'd love for it to be Xavier Legette. But based on who I think is going to get out there earlier and more often and have more snaps and reps, I put Jatavian Sanders as my pick. You maybe could have led me to believe it's Trevin Wallace, steered me in that direction. But for me on the spot, I said Jatavian Sanders. Now, again, end of year, Jonathan Brooks being up there, I love it. Xavier Legette. The thing with Xavier Legette is we haven't seen him a lot really at all in the preseason. He's battled the injuries. I don't think he's got enough reps to be thrown out there, and I don't think his impact is going to be as significant as we want it to be early. I think it's going to take some time for him to ramp up, and then towards the end of the year, maybe that's when he starts to come alive. I'd love to see it sooner because that's what you want out of a rookie impact player, number 1 draft pick. So now the other question, I think we covered off. Well, we didn't. We didn't talk about running backs, at least from the perspective of the depth chart. So Chuba Hubbard is RB1. We're going to talk about some stats, preview the game in a little more detail in a second. Miles Sanders, again, RB2, should be healthy, hopefully. And then Raheem Blackshear. I expect him to feature a lot of Chuba and Miles. We know Canales wants to run the ball. We know that last year when Tampa Bay ran the ball, and I think it was like a little over 100 yards per game in their wins, like 70-something yards per game in their losses. So it's going to be important for them to establish the run early. And I guess really the only other playmaker we didn't talk about is David Moore, who possibly will see some time as a kick returner, punt returner, and maybe coming in a role for the wide receiver group. So rounds it out now. When we switch to defense, and man, if you're a Saints fan, it's been a wild week for the Carolina Panthers. It's been a wild few weeks as the Panthers continue to try to grasp at straws to figure out who the heck is going to be on this roster at certain positions, primarily cornerback and edge. So on the interior, we have Derek Brown, Shai Tuttle, A'Shaun Robinson. Like, those guys are going to be locks. I can't remember which podcast I was listening to, which radio. It might have been Panthers Nation. He brought up a good point. I think it was Rashad, and said, we can talk a lot about the pressure or lack thereof with the edge room, but I think we may see a little bit more between Derek Brown and A'Shaun Robinson. Again, those guys are not really your interior linemen that are known for getting sacks and getting to the quarterback, but I think we could see that elevated between the rotation of those two guys. You then have Jadeveon Clowney coming off a very great year for Baltimore. Again, we'll talk about his stats in a second. Opposite of him, that's been the question all week, who's going to be out there? And it sounds like it should be DJ Johnson, but Canales even said today like it's still open. So you have DJ Johnson, Iku Leota, and then Jamie Sheriff, 4 edge players. And for those that don't know, Panthers made a decision to let go of Clavon Chasen earlier this week. Former first-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars is gone. Canales talked about him looking good on special teams, but not just being the dynamic player or pass rusher that they have or want. And they're going to look across the roster itself. And I know they brought some folks in off of waivers. I don't know that those guys get looks on Sunday. But it's also a question of, okay, you've got Clowney, veteran. Is this going to be trial by fire? And he said yes. Getting these reps early for these young guys will benefit and pay dividends in the long run as you get towards the end of the season. So we got to hope, man. Hope, and if you believe and pray, and hope and pray that this thing pans out like it should. Cornerback, J.C. Horn, no surprise. Can he stay healthy? That'll be the question for this entire year. Mike Jackson coming over via Seattle in the trade with Michael Barrett. He will get the nod. at the other cornerback position, and then we have Xavier Woods and Jordan Fuller. In the updated depth chart, we do not have a nickel cornerback called out here, but we'd anticipate that Troy Hill would be your nickel. Shaw Smith-Wade, likely one of the backup cornerbacks. And then I don't know going into the game if we're going to see Shamar, Bartholomew, Tariq, Castro Fields, or Keenan Isaac. So I do wonder about that. We skipped right over, at least I did, and I apologize because I was looking at edge. Shaq Thompson and Josie Jewell. And you'll have the backups of Claudin Chairless and Trevin Wallace. So where in the heck is the pressure going to come from? I think one of the things I told Randy is, like, the good thing about facing the New Orleans Saints is their offensive line hasn't looked great in the preseason. And again, I'm not a New Orleans Saints expert or podcaster. Clearly, I focus on the Carolina Panthers, but at least the bits and pieces that we've seen, I think this is a good game for the Panthers to try to get it right. I don't know if it's the best situation to be in as you figure this, but there's no doubt in my mind that the Panthers going into next year are going to have to address this need. Now, folks that follow me know I put out a video just a few days ago when all this stuff happened. After the waiver claims, the Panthers are like negative $8.7 million in the hole in cap, over the cap. They let go of Clavon. That's $2 million freed up. They did some restructuring today. I believe it was Shai Tuttle and Taylor Moton. And now they are $6 million above the cap. So there's a little more flexibility. Hopefully they're still shopping around, doing all they can. But you're kind of just shopping from the bargain rack right now. And unless you're trading for a playmaker, an edge, I don't know that you're just going to be able to pick one up off the streets or through waiver claims this far. But, hey, we're still number one in the waiver wire, so we'll hold on to that as much as we can, right? Hold on to it as long as possible. So it's a big game, folks. And we're going to get into kind of the stat lines here in just a second, taking a look back at last year, previewing the game, taking a look at some of the playmakers. But there's a little something, too, to talk about here, and it's really centered around what this season is going to look like for the Carolina Panthers. So earlier today, I started to just diving into a few stats related to the team and or not just the team, but things that I noticed last year. And I think the Panthers kind of get put in a bad light. I mean, they should be. They were 2-15. But there's a big misconception about how bad this team was and or how close they were to actually being competitive. And I think, believe it or not, they were a little more competitive than people give them credit for. Last year, there was a lot of talk that the reason the Panthers never led in the fourth quarter is teams were always up and they ran the ball. It was just a lot of talk around that. There was some bad that we'll talk about in a second when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. But going back last year, if you look at every single game for the Panthers, again, 17 games, they were within one score in 12 out of 17 games going into the fourth quarter. So in reality, if you kind of look at this, they really were only out of it in 5 of the games, which makes me say, like, yes, they are competitive. Now, I know in some of the games, the opposing team had the ball late in the third, and they scored in the fourth. That was a few of them. But I think it's safe to say they were at least in half of the games that they were able to, that they had last year. So you go back and look, Seahawks, they were down by 9. Lions was a blowout. That was 18. Dolphins was a blowout. That was 14. Colts, a lot of mishaps. That was 10. And then Jacksonville, where they just imploded, was 19. Every other one was 8 points or less. So they were tied with the Falcons, down by 7 the first time against the Saints, down by 8 against the Vikings, down by 1 against the Texans, which we know they won, down by 6 to the Bears, 7 Titans, 7 Cowboys, 4 Bucks, 8 Saints, 4 Falcons, 7 Packers, and then 6 to the Bucs at the end of the season. So they were in the games. Offense did not provide any help. We know the defense was competitive. There's also this idea that the defense was good given the state. They were top 5 in yards allowed. I think actually number 4 in total yards allowed on the defensive side of the ball, which is great. But at the same time, I think that's kind of a mirage and an anomaly of the defense. I don't think anyone in the NFL would have sat back and said, yeah, that's a top 5 defense right there. But I think part of that is just misconstrued because of the points that were allowed, because they were terrible there. And the offense just wasn't doing them favor. The offense, whether it was giving up a pick 6, a fumble return for a touchdown, shout out to DJ Wonham, now on the Panthers, or a situation like that, and or just bad field position because of a turnover, the offense did not help the Panthers at all. But we are here now in year 2 for Bryce Young, year 1 of Dave Canales. And the other thing that I saw, and I know I've also talked about, was the journey from worst to first. And this is from the NFL. The NFL publishes out a weekly report capsule for the games. And they said at least one team has won its division the season after finishing in or tied for last place in 19 of the past 21 seasons. So in 19 of the last 21 seasons, a team that was tied or was last ended up winning their division the next year. We know that Houston went from worst to first last year and became a playoff team. So I think people, it happens now. If we were, making bets, and I was talking to folks online about this, I think the one bet would probably be the Bengals at the top, just based off of where they finished last year. I'd probably have them up there. On top of that, though, since 1990, and this is from the NFL, a streak of 34 consecutive seasons, at least 4 teams have qualified for the playoffs that were not in the postseason the year before. So there were 6 new teams in the playoffs last year that had not made it the previous season. The Browns, Lions, Packers, Texans, Rams, and Pittsburgh Steelers. So 6 teams that were not in it the previous year. And again, 4 teams in 34 consecutive seasons have made it. So we may not be worst to first. The Panthers may not be worst to first, but we should be talking about, hey, can they make a run at this thing? Can they make a run and get into the playoffs? And I've already talked about path to the playoffs. Again, folks, I think this is a 6 to 7 win team. Anything above and beyond that, it's icing on the cake. And I do want to see competitive football. I think sometimes I get lost in it, and maybe now's a good time for the rant. Because I've had this rant kind of bottled up in my head to where, I just listen to a lot of shows, and a lot of shows that are just not in tune. A lot of people that regurgitate the same information. And part of me doing this show is I'm a diehard Panthers fan. I want to see them be successful. I want to see this team win football and get back to the way that we know that it can be. And I don't mind, for me, when I get to talk about it and talk about how bad they are or were. I also kind of get frustrated when I hear others. And it's not that I don't care if people talk about how bad the team is. You have every right to do so. But it's just a joke. And people say the same things over and over and over. And it's just frustrating for me. And I'm sure it is for the players and team. But I do think we're going to see a big year out of Bryce Young. And I don't know what big year means. If that means 3,500 yards, if it means 30 touchdown passes, if it means they win 8 or 9 games, I can't quantify what it is, but I do think we are going to see a new version of him that just wasn't there last year. And we've seen kind of the swagger come back, but I think it's a prime opportunity for him to prove people wrong. And I hope for the sake of ourselves that it works out. All right, folks, let's keep this show moving. And we are now going to talk about very quickly the New Orleans Saints, I went over the injury report, looking at the offensive side of the ball, their starters, Chris Olave, great pickup, great receiver. Talise Fuega, left tackle. Lucas Patrick's left guard. Eric McCoy, center. Cesar Ruiz, right guard. Trevor Penning, who's kind of had a rough go at it, right tackle. They have 12 personnel as well, with tight end Foster Moreau. Taysom Hill listed as tight end, man. Taysom Hill is a Swiss Army knife. I can't stand seeing him when we play them. He's so good. Rashid Shaheed, who had a great breakout season, did great against us last year. Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, not suspended. Jamal Williams. And then Adam Prentice. They actually have a fullback. On the second team, the only thing I was going to call out is A.T. Perry, Cedric Wilson Jr., and then Spencer Rattler is, I guess, tied with Jake Heiner for QB2. QB2 doesn't really matter. It's just for me personally for the Saints, tracking them. On the defensive side of the ball, right now they have Carl Granderson and Chase Young. Both is the right defensive end. I don't know. I guess they're going to wait to name a starter. Kalen Saunders at tackle. Nathan Shepard at tackle. Cam Jordan, left defensive end. Pete Warner at the will. Demario Davis at the middle linebacker. Willie Gay at the Sam. Paulson Adebo, left cornerback. Jordan Howden, strong safety. Tyron Matthew, free safety. Marshawn Lattimore is your right cornerback. So that's your starters on offense and defense. Let's see if we can get this pulled up here and the Saints get a little preview going here. All right, folks, the Saints open and the Carolina Panthers open the regular season Sunday, September 8th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, noon Central, at the newly renovated Caesars Dome. Remember, the Caesars Superdome is hosting the Super Bowl this year. They put together a drone video of the renovations if you haven't had a chance to go out and see it, but it looks great. New Orleans leads the all-time series between the teams 30-28, and they swept the Panthers in the 2023 season for the first time since 2020, so we had split up until then. With a demanding preseason in the books, New Orleans will be eager to start their regular season campaign to improve on last year's 9-8 mark. The Panthers finished at 2-15, brought in a new coaching staff and front office, and committed to building around Bryce Young. Dave Canales, in his first season as head coach of the Panthers, comes to Carolina after spending his first 13 seasons with the Seahawks, and then last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, we all know that, right? Know when the Panthers entered the league. I'm not going through that, and I should say shout out to Saints.com. They're the ones who put this really nice write-up together. Let's see. The Panthers entered the NFL's, I guess, expansion franchise in 95. Since then, the Saints lead the series. We talked about that. Picking up the home 2017 NFC Wildcard Showdown as well. Let's see. In the 58 regular season games of the series, there have been 1,269 points scored by New Orleans, 1,219 points allowed, so we know this game is close. There was a 5-game winning streak from 2000 to 02, a 4-game winning streak in games played at the Caesars Dome from 98 to 2000, 28 games decided by double digits, 8 games decided by 21 or more points, in 29 games decided by 8 points or less. A 130-point win, they blew us out in 2020, and 132-point loss by New Orleans back in the day. The last meeting was December 10th. Saints won 28-6. The Saints ended a 3-game losing streak with a 28-6 victory over the Panthers. The win improved the Saints to 6-7. Carolina dropped to 1-12. Saints contributions from all 3 units included running back Alvin Kamara, who scored on a 9-yard run, linebackers Nafai Sewell and Damari Jackson, on special teams to block a punt by Johnny Hecker. Yeah, that one sucked. I remember that. Officially ruled a forced fumble, and they returned to score. Chris Olave scoring off of a touchdown pass from Derek Carr, and tight end Jimmy Graham. So they were lighting us up, and Bryce Young had a terrible day. 13 of 36, 137 yards. This was the 200th victory under their current GM. Can you imagine having a GM in a front office that's able to stay together for 200 career victories? That would be great, right? All right. Kind of going over last year. And I mean, last year is last year. But looking at the scoring average, Panthers were 31st in the NFL, 13.9 points per game. New Orleans was 9th at 23.6. The opponent scoring average was how many points you're giving up. New Orleans was 8th. So pretty stout offensive defense at 19.2, and 24.5 is what the Panthers gave up, which is 29th in the NFL. Total offensive rank in yards per game. New Orleans was 14th. Carolina was 32nd. The rushing attack was about even. Panthers actually had the edge, about 104 yards per game. Passing offense, we were last. I don't think that's any surprise. New Orleans was 11th. We were 4th in total yards allowed. Like I said, top 5. New Orleans was 13th. And, of course, yeah, our passing defense stood up great. Turnover margin was terrible. We were -9, which was 25th. New Orleans was plus 11. Not a lot of scoring for the Panthers. 23 total touchdowns last year, 44 for New Orleans. Penalties were about even in total yardage. So, big game coming up. Let's see. Saints and Panthers connections. Saints defensive end Isaiah Foskey and Blake Grupe and Carolina tight end Tommy Tremble were teammates at Notre Dame. We know about Andy Dalton spending time in New Orleans as a backup. Saints offensive lineman Lucas Patrick played at Duke. J.C. Horn's father, Joe Horn, played wideout for the Saints from 2000 to 2006 and a member of the Hall of Fame. The team's Hall of Fame, that is. Fullback Adam Prentice and J.C. Horn were teammates at South Carolina. Dom Capers served as the secondary coach of the Saints in 86 to 91. And, oh my gosh, these just go on and on. It's too many for me to read. There's a ton of connections here. It's pretty cool. Saints linebacker DeMarco Jackson played at App State. Cool for him. I already told you all about Spencer Rattler. Man, the connections are like, I'm not even kidding you. They got a whole page of connections here. All right, let's get into the capsule for this week, man. We have Dennis Allen coming into this game with an all-time record of 24-46, 343, about 34% win percentage is not good. He is 2-3 against the Carolina Panthers, and that includes the postseason versus the opponent. I don't know how that. The Panthers haven't made the postseason since he's been there, so I'm very confused about that. Okay. Well, anyways, I don't know if that was in a previous life, so sorry. I talked about this series 30-28. Saints won both of the games last year. Talked about where they stacked up statistically in offense and defense. I've already previewed last year with Bryce Young and what he did. 2,800 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 73.7 passer rating, 58.8 completion percentage. Derek Carr gets a bad rap in New Orleans, but he didn't have a bad year by any standard. And it's funny because at one point before we drafted Bryce, there was conversations about Derek Carr coming here, but he had 3,878 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 97.7 passer rating, 68.4% completion percentage. Chuba Hubbard, our leading rusher, with 902 yards, 5 touchdowns. Adam Thielen was your leading receiver in receptions with 103 and just over 1,000 yards. Deontay Johnson with Pittsburgh, 51 receptions for 717 yards and 5 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara is just a beast, man. We know he missed some time earlier in the year. He finished with 694 rushing yards, 75 receptions for 466 yards. I mean, the dude is a playmaker. Had 5 rushing, 1 receiving. Chris Olave, 1,100 receiving yards, 87 receptions, 5 touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed, 46 for 719 and 5. Not bad at all. Defensive side of the ball, the Panthers lost, like we talked about, their pass rush. You now have Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wonham. It's funny that we list both of those guys as your sack leaders coming back from other teams. That's who we got. So there's going to be a lot to figure out. On the defense with interceptions, Jordan Fuller, who was with the Rams, had 3 last year. Xavier Woods for Carolina had 2. For New Orleans, Carl Granderson and Demario Davis both had 8.5 sacks each. And, yeah, we know they turned the ball over with Paulson Adebo, and Tyrann Mathieu both with 4 interceptions. Scoring-wise, man, kicking game on point, 40 out of 40 on extra points for Blake Group. Field goals, 30 out of 37. We know Eddie was 17 of 20 on points after, 25 out of 29 on field goals. Talked about Bryce Young's stats. We've talked about Derek Carr's stats. This is interesting for Derek Carr. Passed for with a 97.7 passer rating. Became the 3rd player ever, including Peyton Manning and Matt Ryan, with 3,000 passing yards in each of the first 10 seasons. That's pretty big. Had a 105 rating in 4 of his final 5 home starts last season. I think Derek Carr has a chance to potentially do some work, man. You don't have a good pass rush. You have Alvin Kamara that is able to get the run game established. You got weapons in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. I think there's a good chance, a good recipe in the cornerback room like we talked about. We saw what Buffalo did to our ones. And I know we were missing a few folks, not many, but missing a few folks. But Buffalo moved that ball easily with their second team crew. So I'm personally expecting a pretty big game out of Derek Carr. I'd love to be shocked. On our side of the ball, Miles Sanders, man, it's your time. It's his time to step up. We need to see a version of who he was during his time with Philadelphia if we want this team to have any success at all. Adam Thielen continues to be reliable. He became the 3rd undrafted player ever, including Rod Smith and Wes Walker, with multiple 100-plus catch seasons. Dude's racking up. And the 4th undrafted player since 1967 with 700 career catches and 8,000 career receiving yards. Dude can ball. Derek Brown, monster on the interior. Last year had a career high 103 tackles, most by a defensive lineman in a single season since 2000. Is the only defensive lineman with 20-plus tackles for loss, 20-plus pass deflections since entering the NFL in 2020. Had 10 tackles and an interception in the last meet. Wow. 10 tackles and an interception in the last time that they played. Clowney, we know, is making his debut. My gosh, I hope he is anything and everything we hoped. Josie Jewell as well. Shaq Thompson, Jordan Fuller, and Xavier Woods. Big game, man. Big game. And yeah, I mean, Cam Jordan, 117.5 career sacks. Until this guy retires, I'm always going to fear him. I talked about Carl Granderson. Chase Young had 7.5 sacks last year, and we, wanted him here in Carolina, but it didn't work out. And then Demario Davis, 121 tackles last year, 12 for loss, 6.5 sacks. In 2023 is the only player with 100 tackles, 10 tackles for loss in each of the past 7 seasons. Aims for his 3rd in a row versus Carolina with a sack, and 5th with tackle for loss. Dude's putting up stats. Pete Warner, 93 tackles last year. Marshawn Lattimore ranks 4th among DBs with 86 pass deflections since 2017. Paulson Adebo ranked 3rd in the NFL. Tyrann Mathieu, who continues to be a beast. I think this game, in calling it, you have Chris Myers, Mark Schlereth, and then Jen Hale as your field reporter. I mean, the success of this game, we saw Bryce Young make a lot of rookie mistakes last year. Partly, hey, offensive line was bad, offense was bad. They've changed the offense on him 3 times during the season. It's a big game for the Carolina Panthers, and I see a lot of people saying the New Orleans Saints have to win this game. Yeah, I know there's a lot of pressure on Dennis Allen for him to perform and get out here and see if he can right the ship in New Orleans and maybe keep things afloat. The Panthers can get out to an early lead. One, that place is going to be loud. We know that they are pumping in the volume at practice, trying to get accustomed to the noise. It's never easy to play there. If the Panthers can either get out early or disrupt and look like the better team, maybe go up 2 scores, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if they can, you start to have the fan base turn on Dennis Allen, because I think there's a good portion of fans. I know you got a new offensive scheme coordinator down there, but there's fans that probably just want this whole thing blown up at this point. And we've been there. Carolina Panthers fans have been there because we've had to do it and go through it the last 2 or 3 years, and really 5 or 6 if we're being honest. It's been a journey. So I think coming into this game, it's a big game, big divisional game to start the season. Get to see Dave Canales in his debut. Bryce Young, year 2, is there improvement? That's going to be the big question marks coming into this game. I personally, I'm a little kind of bullish on the Panthers right now, and probably because it's the first game of the year. I don't know any podcast host that's going to come out and pick the opposing team to win. I will say I think New Orleans is going to put up a good fight. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if New Orleans pulls this out. I think a lot of the things that we talked about on the offensive side of the ball are going to work out pretty well if they can take advantage of the cornerbacks and edge. But at the same time, I also feel like this is a fresh start. You're on the road. You're a little more focused in week 1 compared to being at home. I know it's not like a big thing, but I do think some of those small things add up. And so for me, I like the Carolina Panthers to come away with a victory. I'm going to kind of stick to my prediction. I know the line opened up as 4. I think it got down to 3.5. One of the books I looked at, but staying around 3.5 to 4. I think the Panthers squeak this one out. 24-20 is going to be my final prediction. So anyways, folks, man, this is quite the episode. Not my normal length, as you can see, as we get ready for the season. Spend a little more time chatting it up, but appreciate it if you did make it through. And if you did last this long, drop a comment and or subscribe, follow the show. It's much appreciated. This is Carolina Dad, and I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Y'all have a good one.